right. Well, it's kind of a different class than we had last week, and that's okay. For those who weren't here last week, we did have homework, but it's okay. There's no quiz. So the thing I left for us to finish up on was just read Proverbs 1, verses 8 through 19, and that's where we'll start off this evening. I didn't mention this last week, but I'm sure some of you may have had questions. This study is kind of based off a book. It's called Walking with Wisdom, a study of Proverbs that I received or got to receive because my professor told me I needed to buy it. And so that's kind of where I'm getting some of my stuff. And so if you want to purchase it for yourself, I can give you more information, or you can just look at it and think, okay, yeah, it's a book. Maybe lower how much honor and respect I'm giving him in my mind because someone else is saying it. But whatever. So let us begin in Proverbs 1, verses 8, and we'll go through verse 19. It reads, "Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. For they are a graceful garland for your head and pennants for your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie and wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot among us, and we will have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird, but these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy and unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors." So we'll get started, and since we have a little bit more, we can break out into maybe some small groups around us and to have this discussion. But what stands out to you about these proverbs that we just read? We don't necessarily, I guess we won't break up for this time. But what stands out to you about these few verses that we read?
I think it's so graphic. Not many people, Satan's a lot more sneakier than that. Not many people's going to fall for that list of stuff.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably some, but not many. But Satan's a lot more cagier than that.
Sure.
It's all still true.
Yeah.
You would think these verses wouldn't have to be written.
How so?
So, don't lie in wait for innocent blood. You know, those things you think, what's wrong with these people?
Yeah. Oh.
Part of it ties in with Dale's lesson from last Sunday. And that, my son, walk not thou in the way with them. So the paths we take are very important. That we choose.
Yeah.
I taught at the high school level for a lot of years, and I've worked with emotionally disturbed youth, and there is an extremely strong draw among teenage males for adventure, excitement, and everything. And I turned one of them into the police one time, and he said, "Miss Humphrey, why did you turn him into the police?" And I said, "Because I don't want to pick up the paper and see that they drug your body out of the bottom of the Colorado River." And later he came back to me and he said, I won't see you next year, can I have a hug? And I thought, what's that all about? He said, you told me you turned me into the police because you didn't want to see my body pulled out of the Colorado River. And he said, Miss Humphrey, my mother wouldn't care. And he said, I may not ever get to see you again. Could I have a hug?
Mm.
And he got one. But friendships to teenagers are so important,
Sure.
and they need to be warned.
Yeah.
Not to make wrong choices.
One of the things that I guess stood out to me in my reading of it and was kind of this idea of we hear of the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? And in the New Testament we don't necessarily think about the thieves that come and beat up on this man who's just traveling along this path. But it's one of those, even in the Proverbs, it's taking kind of a different approach to the parable. It's not saying be like the Samaritan, it's saying don't be like the thief. Don't be this guy who you hear, hey, I know you're really struggling for money. Well, we have this plan to get some money. All you have to do is lie on the side of the road and wait for someone to come by and attack him. That's not saying that Jesus is saying that the thief isn't, I don't know, I'm digging myself into the hole. And anyway, but it's that kind of same imagery of, that's where I jumped in my head at least, and now I'm just kind of, I was thinking about that while I read it. What else? What else stood out to any of you guys? And if there's nothing else, we can go along.
You know, jumping back before the verse 7, you know, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom we've heard. But
Mhm.
I really like the verse talking about listen to your father's instruction and your mother's teaching, and how important that is. When you have a functional home life, how important that is for children to understand that, you know, when you have children, you love them so much, you have to show tough love at times, but you're instructing them to protect them. Not just you saying, you know, I mean, you love them because you're trying to teach them and mold them, and how important it is to listen to that instruction as young people.
And to warn them about the evil in the world.
Sure.
It's all around us.
You know, implicit in the passage and in what Jackie said and even what Maury said is the fact that those who are older, particularly mother and father, should know more, do know more than a child who oftentimes thinks at various points, I know it all and you all know nothing. And so it's coming from a premise that there's a wisdom to be gained from paying attention to those who are older.
Sure, and that kind of takes us back to what Sonia pointed out last week. I didn't point it out. I didn't say anything about old people. That was Sonia that pointed it out. That old people were wiser, and so it was one of those. It's bringing us back to there's that maturity that comes with age, but it's also with the experience, and those figures are like mothers and fathers to us.
Bergan, older people are wiser if they've walked well through their life. Older
Sure.
people are not automatically wiser. I know there's that deal that goes out there, but that's not true. It's not an automatic thing. Yes, they're more experienced, and hopefully they've come through those experiences well, but it's not an automatic thing that you're wiser as you get older. My opinion.
You've got some experience to draw on.
Throughout the scriptures, there's a lot about selflessness and self, as well as ego, and they address this from the sense of an invitation like, and that's kind of a gang thing too.
Mm.
We're inviting you into this clique, as it were. And so it's easy to get your head all swelled up with, I'm wanted. And most young people, that's one of the things they do, they want to belong. They want to be seen as something valuable that people want. So there's some wisdom in that too, to avoid that.
It's those that say, do what I say, don't do what I do. There's some wisdom in that, referring to the same people Jess was.
Sure.
Then they're not wise. We have the experience. We know if we still do it, we're not behaving wisely. That you can give some pretty good advice. I advise you not to do that.
Sure. Yeah, and that kind of takes the wind out of the sails on the second question I had. And we kind of already started jumping there. But the second question I had is how could these proverbs be applicable to teaching young people? Jackie, I think your story kind of talked about it well, and some of the comments we've had is it's because, one, yes, it's older people forming the younger generations, but it's young people are stupid and foolish and fall into these traps and aren't always paying attention to where their life is going, and it takes someone redirecting them in moments of trials and situations. One of the things that the book kind of pulls out is this idea of a path metaphor. And so I had a question off of that. What are some of the expressions or things that we say that kind of also share those path metaphors? It doesn't have to be a biblical passage. We could think of all the biblical passages, and that would be just as good of a conversation. But what are those other like little snippets or sayings that we say just in our everyday life that have something to do with paths? And
Fork in the road.
a fork in the road. What else?
Well, it's not using the word path, but when we say to someone, your behavior has consequences, this behavior
Sure.
will lead to this consequence.
Sure.
That's informing them that their walk needs to be directed where the consequences are positive instead of
Sure.
undesirable.
For every action, there's an equal opposite reaction.
Okay. So now we're getting kind of definitely farther away from the past. Let's just throw out my questions as it was being bad and just say, what are some of those Bible passages we can think of that have something to do with the path or walking in the way of the Lord? Or as I say that, it sounds like several different verses out of Paul's epistles. But what are some of those verses that we can think of just off the top of our head?
Your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path.
Okay, so the word is yeah. I'm tongue twisted. Man, I'm getting tongue twisted trying to repeat more over here. But and now I lost my place. Man.
The church was referred to as the way several times in scriptures.
Sure.
Straight and narrow.
Straight and narrow. We can think of the passages in Joshua where God is commanding Joshua to be strong and courageous and do not waver from your path to the left or to the right because I have put you on this path. I've told you where the straight and narrow is. There's I am the way, the truth, and the life. Well, that's very much not necessarily path, but it's the idea of there is only one way to God.
In fact, I can't pull them out. I'll have to ask Dale. The first two passages you used in the lesson Sunday were about, I think, if I remember correctly, walking in that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
But one was in Proverbs and one,
The first one was in Isaiah.
okay, in Isaiah. I think that's right. can see them almost written down on my little piece of paper.
Sure.
But I can't pull them right now.
Yeah, Dale should know all of these verses. He's preaching through them.
Even set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth or earthly things, because ultimately our mind and conscience are gonna direct our paths where our feet go.
Sure.
Back to your original question, what are some euphemisms? But when I said fork in the road, we know you have a path, you make choices, but the other one is, it may be a rocky road, meaning you have a path, you have a road, but there's gonna be obstacles, and that would be a modern way of saying what you first addressed.
Sure. And so the reason why the book brings it up, or my professor who made me buy his book brought it up, is this idea of it all intertwines, and it's because there's wisdom in it, right? The wisdom is and we see it even in the Psalms, and so it's probably Solomon's borrowing from David's idea that he writes in the Psalms of there's a way towards God and there's a way away from God. David doesn't come out and say it in those words, but he does say the wise are the ones who don't sit among the scoffers and who do go out and do all these things. It is the wise who finds themselves planted by streams of running water, who seeks God. And Solomon builds off that idea, and you could say the prophets build off that idea even more, and then Jesus says a lot of the same things, and then Paul builds off of it. And because the wisdom is we should always be seeking God in our walk. Let's see.
Another thing, in John, as John wrote, to love one another. You children love. He stressed that over and over, and in so doing, we can help each other in, I believe, in finding that path that we need to stay on. When he was old, so the scriptures say.
Sure.
In his writings.
Yeah. Well, part of, or these verses come in an interesting part of Proverbs. It's very clearly part of the section where it's building on this idea of a father telling his son some instructions of wisdom. It's, son, I want you to know the wise way of dealing and handling yourself. And there's instructions and ways I want you to see live out your life. And one of the things that raises a question, and this one we can break up into smaller groups to talk about, but what teaching tactic might there be, or what's the purpose of teaching, or this way of making folly and evil sound tempting? And you can just break out with the people that you're kind of around. Some of you might need to move closer to one another or move further forward. But the more I think about it, that was a very poorly worded question. But why would a father who wants his son to be wise and avoid evil and do good, why would he make folly and evil sound tempting? And I'll give us, let's say, 3 minutes to discuss it.
Because it is.
He should.
Dennis, come join us, or we'll come join you. Maybe that's what we need to do.
You stay put, here we go.
Yeah, let's go over there.
We might need you.
Do you ever try to boys and they should make temptation very tempting, it's enticing?
I had live, content was, but they still go their way. They do their own,
Evil
but
ways.
Joel,
And just
I
like
love
when
him.
speaking of
He's
the
a great, good,
woman
but
waiting
I like some of them. He might complain. He might complain for a while, but he always does what
And,
Sounds like
so
you
there
did
will be
that
things,
one too.
because there will be things
Well,
that one
my dad was
needed to do.
an
I would
alcoholic.
like the,
I was
I want to be wrong with
more
that.
than once,
I want to be right.
and I hated it. But I went into service. I said, he had been sober for a year. The last 5 years of his life, he's the best man I've ever known. Because his attitude, his life had changed. His health changed my life.
So his what you're getting at where he posed the question, is he was tempted to do things and he fell into the temptation. And he was trying to let you know what it meant. So in order you would not fall into the same temptation. Is that basically is what you're saying, the results of that?
Are we talking about John?
It was a hard life.
Okay, well, John, this foster son lived with us 2 years.
Listen to this. I tried to listen
All his high school years.
more than what I write, listening to his lessons.
But,
Because I like to write certain things down and because you study
that his girlfriends.
and you can learn from what you've read
We told
and by
him.
repeating what you've been told.
We told him, we would see him through school.
Well, the deal
We
is,
had to,
you might as well paint temptation
his girlfriend,
for what it is.
Yeah.
that he wanted
Because
to
if
stay
you lie about
her house,
it,
sleeping
then
with her.
you're no longer a credible voice in
And,
your child's life and spouse. So you might as well say, hey,
I'm sure to John, it
there's,
sounded
it is
really
enticing,
tempting.
there is pleasure in
And
it.
he.
But that's not the end of the path.
His three-bedroom.
The end of the path is not good.
We told him he would have to move
There
out.
may be, so I think it's important to be trustworthy, so much.
All right, let's come back together. So what were some of the reasons you guys discussed in your little small groups?
Bill's our spokesperson.
Okay, Bill, you're on the floor, or the spotlight's yours, whatever you want to say.
Don't do the fence room.
Really, John?
I mentioned that if, depending on the state of the son, if he has any tenderness or thoughts in him, the sarcasm might be, wouldn't it be great to go out and join this group and really hurt somebody badly just to get some money? And he might not be thinking, you've heard that on TV all the time. I didn't mean to kill them. I didn't mean to hurt them. Well, what did you mean to do when you were out doing these things?
Sure.
So that it could be a sarcastic kind of a thing too.
Okay, so we have a sarcastic point maybe. What were some of the other groups' thoughts?
We were saying it seemed kind of interesting how it could have been a very simple, don't do this, but it sort of expands on into, if you do this, it's gonna be their blood and that's gonna be your blood, and it goes on into some detail to where it's kind of like a stepping ladder of like consequences that are a lot deeper than that kid's probably thinking. But anyway.
So it's to think through the thought more. Okay. What about the groups over here?
But one thing in there, when he said, you do it for no reason, that stuck in my mind. So theft would be no reason, theft is to get money. So I think of the mob mentality. You get with the group and it starts getting out of control, and because that's so graphic, I mean, we just don't comprehend it, but that is a mob mentality. So that would be for no reason. You can get caught up in a group, and that's what it can lead to if you don't get out there at the beginning of the ball game.
I didn't say this to the group, but the serpent in the garden made it sound really tempting to Eve. I'm not worried about that. You're gonna be as wise as God. You're gonna know everything God knows.
There's lots of temptations in the world.
Youth are like a sponge. They're gonna suck it up. I was just posing the example of a young man that I was watching a football game with, and he looked at me and said, "I can't stand that coach." I looked at him and says, "What did he ever do to you? Why do you hate this coach?" It's basically because he heard somebody older say the same thing. And while that seems like a small thing, those type of things can soak in and grow and grow and grow.
As a parent, you're not just trying to win a battle. You're trying to be victorious in a war. And if you're gonna be victorious in the war, you have to tell the truth in order to be credible, in order to be believable in the future. So you paint temptation for what it is, and oftentimes temptation is pleasurable. Acknowledge that. But as Jonathan mentioned, that's not the end of the road. It goes somewhere.
Sure. Not to put you guys on the spot, but you're the last group I haven't heard from, so.
We weren't real productive back there. We had said that through temptation there can be perseverance, and kind of talked about how Jesus was tempted, by the devil, and he set an example for us. But it kind of goes along with what she said about the devil making in the Garden of Eden, making that fruit seem very tempting. It's the temptation is there. It's what you do from the temptation that matters.
Yeah. So you all made very great points. It helps if I think through what I'm saying before I start talking and just making noises. But you guys all had very great points, and there is a lot of truth to what you guys were saying. It could be kind of a sarcastic comment where surely you're not thinking of it in this way. Like even a kid should know that this is there's some form of right and wrong, and there is a point of, well, at the same time, that doesn't mean you don't need it to, hey, if you start down this path, you're going to end up here. And there is some part of it that you have to be reminded of just how the trap is laid, and being told there is truth to it. I think I'm not going to take credit, and I'm sure the person I heard it from someone else, and they heard it from someone else, and so they can't take credit for it either. So it's one of those. There was a conversation, and it was about how they were comparing the holidays and how you celebrate with your kids, and then also how you take your kids to church. And how, well, there's the Easter Bunny and there's Santa Claus, and you run down the list, and all of it is these unseen people that are made up. And then you tell them, and then there's Jesus, who the kid never sees, but we're supposed to trust our parents who lied to us about the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus and all these other people that. Sorry if you. Yeah, I'm sorry to burst some bubbles here, but it's one of those where you have to, like, realize if you're lying about the significance of temptation, if you're lying about where these paths go, it's not that big of a deal if you start down this way, which then we get into some gray areas with grace and forgiveness and all of that. But the wise thing is to never be in that situation where you are trapped to yourself. And part of it is you have to have some kernel of trust and truth. And I do think that that's what the father figure here is trying to do. You should trust me. I am telling you the truth. Why would I lie about this? I'm not lie. I don't lie to you about the bad stuff, so you should listen to me about the good stuff. Another part of this proverb or set of proverbs is this idea of traps. And part of it is you sit on the side of the road and you set a trap, hoping someone else will fall in. And the kernel of wisdom is if you're setting the traps, you're going to be the one who's actually entrapped. And so before we move on from this section, can you think of a time where people set traps for themselves? Whether it's, we can think of the cartoons where it's always like Tom sets a trap for Jerry, but he ends up trapping himself. And we can talk about the cartoon version of it, but are there ever times where someone, by what they're doing in their life, is actually setting themselves up to be trapped? And we can spend, let's do another 3 minutes with your group kind of talking about some of those examples.
Revenge is always a crime. They say usually they say like revenge, you should not revenge yourself on somebody. Like that's always a phrase like dig two, they should like dig two. What do they call it? Like the plots, you know, graves, that's the word.
One thing you can't remember is lies. You can remember the truth. And if you lie, it's going to catch you sooner or later.
That's the cartoon I got.
What goes along with the idea of revenge is the bitterness that you feel. The person that you feel bitter toward doesn't even know you feel bitter more than likely. But you're kind of imprisoned by it. So you created your own trap or prison.
You're setting yourself up. Something's not funny. First thing not so great. Never did.
That was back the first of the month, we had 8 and 3, and then we had games in front of
You set yourself a trap when you know you're
working too hard, your blood pressure up, and having a stroke.
Yeah, just like,
Know anybody who fix that? Know anybody who fix that description? Well, it's law enforcement people, you guys have seen people set traps for themselves. I don't know. Yeah, that's, you're.
All right, let's come back together. I heard Bill talk about Star Wars, so he may want to start.
Nora, ask you a question. Is a trap always a trap?
No, is it always negative?
Is it always negative?
I don't know, Nora, is it?
I gave my example personally. In my senior year, I skipped 80 out of 180 days of school. And consequently, there wasn't a college in the universe that would accept me. And the only reason I got into the into a college at all is because I was in the military at one point, and they thought surely he grew up somewhere in that process. So I set a trap for myself, and I got trapped.
What else? What were some other examples of traps? Either you've set for yourself, or you know of someone who you may be related to that set a trap for themselves.
Back here, we talked about papers that we put off until the last minute, and the whole time, especially me, like, I'll think, oh, I really need to do that paper, and I need to do it by this day so that it'll have the 100 that I need it to have, and then I'll wait till the last minute, and it'll be a crummy paper, so I'll get a crummy grade on it, but what else did I think would happen, you know? So I set myself up.
Sure.
Her crummy grade was like an 80.
Yeah.
My good grades.
Yeah. All right, this side of the room, you're last again.
Speak up, Jack.
They're all perfect.
Oh yeah.
We talk about like New Year's resolutions, a great example of setting traps for yourself of, I want to do this, but not putting a plan together to help you follow through on those commitments.
Sure. There's always that story of someone who says, well, I'm going to eat healthy, and then they mess up once, and then they just have the worst, like, few weeks of just eating terrible. And if they hadn't focused on it, right, and made it such a hurdle, they probably would have just eaten the same thing and been actually better off if they didn't have those weeks where they were just eating whatever they wanted all the time. But what are some other traps?
One thing, you can remember the truth, but you can't remember your lies. And the lies will catch up with you soon. If you tell the truth, you're better off. That's following what you're supposed to do.
He's speaking as a law enforcement officer here.
There's one that we didn't say that crossed my mind that's happening now. I mean, making rules. Oh, we're gonna make a rule against this, and the first thing you know, politically, then the first thing you know, well, we'd like to do that, we've already made a rule, we can't do it. You set yourself up for a trap there. Or you can or you can't do something, it comes your turn, we shouldn't have made that rule.
So I'll say one of the traps I set for myself multiple times, so many times. So I'm not the best at like languages, right? Which is really kind of funny that I then took a degree that requires me to go through at least 2 languages. LCU made me feel like I was good at one language. It turns out I wasn't really that good. I just had some easy graders helping me out. But I did this all throughout high school, and somehow I got convinced to do a 3rd year of Spanish. But I struggled in first 2 years, and then I signed up for a 3rd year of Spanish because I just love torturing myself, I guess. And then I have all of these classes in Greek, and it's the same thing every time. I started off the semester, and when it's like the alphabet and the common words that you are quick to pick up, it's I walk, I talk. I know these phrases. I can get them down really easily. It doesn't take that much time studying or doing anything. I don't need to devote all this time, and then, okay, it gets slightly harder. My grade starts curving down ever so slightly on all the quizzes, and then I have a midterm, and it bombs my grade. And then for the next half of the semester, I get to work my butt off to pull it up to a passing grade and pass by the skin of my teeth just to start the whole thing over again the next semester. I've done this so many times that you'd think I would learn. You would think I would stop setting that trap for myself of saying, hey, maybe I should, I don't know, not think that I'm better than studying my vocab. Maybe I should do the work that's necessary to learn Spanish or Greek or Hebrew and I'm sure eventually there will be another language thrown in there because of course there will. But it's one of those where you would think eventually I would stop doing that. You would think eventually the kid who's burned his hand on the stove so many times would stop putting himself in a situation where he wants to touch the stove and burn his hand. It's kind of the trap that I fall into. And with the semester just now starting, you know where I am. I'm starting off okay, and it's about to go downhill, but hopefully we can save it. If I'm thinking about it, I'll avoid it. But so we kind of get the idea of the traps. But kind of the question I wanted us to close on, and so we'll spend a little bit more time talking in our groups about it, but how do we prepare ourselves to choose wisdom over folly? When faced with invitation, especially when we're faced with invitations to join the gang, those groups that want to go off and do foolish things, be dumb teenagers, whatever it may be. Not saying that there aren't groups of dumb senior citizens who go off and do foolish things. It's just, what are those things that we do to prevent ourselves from falling into those traps and avoiding those invitations? And since it's kind of a weird time, let's spend 6 minutes and then we'll come back right before the end and share. And so just talk amongst yourselves. And if I start hearing off-topic conversations, we will come back. So go ahead and talk about this question for the next few minutes.
Say the best way to do that is to get old.
I'm actually in that spot right now. I'm trying to, from my understanding, my revelation is that it's a learned, it's a learned pattern. So I will also, okay, so here's a look into my life. I'm writing my thesis, which is it's a very time intensive thing, but it's not linear, so there's no, like you can set time that you're always gonna wait for it. I play a number of video games, and I'm not, I usually be playing video games, but what I've realized is I have to break the pattern that I'm used to. So when I'm not tempted to play video games, I have to make myself do things so that when the times come where I am to play video games, I've learned a new pattern to not fall in that trap. That makes any sense.
Learning new patterns.
Learning a new pattern to basically kind of force my way away, curve my way around is I guess is my force. To learn a new pattern of behavior to not choose a follow.
So your pattern as you're doing now to yourself is to think first.
We lost our.
And then to think before you make your choice. And in reference to the question of joining the gang, to me the main thing is when you're faced, think of the repercussions before you do the action.
Yeah, just
What's it gonna cost me if this is what I choose?
I don't have the time,
That's why we can
It's been your pattern.
my pattern in the past is wasting time and not setting like strict rules. I would only work on this thing, not myself to not pick up my phone, not, say I'm bored and gonna do something else. That's my normal terrible time management. So now I'm trying to set strict time limits, like between this hour and this hour, plus 3 hours. So I'm only gonna focus on this thing. And when that happens, you really learn how long an hour is. You're focused on one thing, you're like, wow, this is another time.
But you're talking about I mean, that's very disciplined.
And this,
So, what is, enables you to be disciplined now in those moments with these new patterns that you didn't have before? What's the difference?
I guess the difference is the desire to want to be more disciplined, because I've seen, because it's always, I'll do this now, you know, 5 minutes, and then later on you're like, I could have been so much further had I just did it then, which will then make me say, well, if I do this, if I discipline myself now, when I look back in the future, I'll say, okay, I'm better than that then. So I guess it's a desire to be more disciplined.
And the cost.
Yeah. And then the cost.
You compare the costs and
Because we all do, discipline is about, what is this, what has it cost me? And what did I gain? Then I walk away from it. And perhaps having a strict parent is, once again, it'd be the thing, these were repercussions. Man, I'd rather not have to face that. So I'm grateful for a very strict parent myself. But then two sisters can take the same different, one could be resentful, and another could be fearful. One can be just desire to accomplish what you want. So it goes back to your desire. Know what your desire is.
It's your goal to go for it, and go for it with gusto, the right one, and you get there.
Well, desire is a critical piece of this. The interesting thing about Proverbs is it doesn't hold out much hope for people who are foolish. And the reason is because their desires never grow up. And so what you're displaying is, hey, my desires haven't always been very mature. But they're becoming more mature because I'm feeling, in some ways, forced, but in another way, my wants are different. They are different. I'm ready now to move on with life. In order to do that,
All right, I'll cut Dale off.
I have to practice some discipline.
All right, Nora's giving me the stink eye, so I guess that means we need to come back together. So we don't have to go group by group, but what were just shout them out or don't shout over each other. But what were some of the things that you guys talked about as ways to prevent ourselves from prevent ourselves from joining the game and prepare us for a way of wisdom? And now you all got quiet, so.
In some things, we talked about having premeditated decisions, like if faced with this, I know I'm not going to do this, or I'm gonna be the only one not doing this. And we're gonna have surprise decisions where we might not already have that thought out that far ahead. But I think it's important, like we learned in John, I think it's 10, but it may not be, maybe 7. But just, Jesus is the good shepherd. He knows our name, calls us by name. We know his voice. And so we know his voice if we know his will and his ways, and we're in his word. And I think when we're faced with those spontaneous decisions of temptation, we have to seek wisdom and know, is that Jesus' voice I'm hearing? Guide me this direction, or is it noise and voice of the world or Satan?
Sure. Or some other things I guess you guys talked about.
Talking about if it's looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And we didn't say it in these words, but some of the experiences we were talking about is that if there is a feeling of, should I do it or not? No, you shouldn't do it.
You just keep your eyes open and watch what's going on around you and see if you want to be wound up in that situation. That's what I've done over my life.
Sure.
We kind of talked about discipline, like learning, at least in my opinion, like learning new patterns to set yourself up to be aware of when those decisions come, and it's easier to not go with the crowd if you've disciplined yourself to follow what you're supposed to.
Well, all right. Since we all got scared by the bell, that means class is over. But we do have homework for next time. If you could read ahead and read Proverbs 7 and 8, that will be what we talk about next week. So, thank you guys.